You guys have sent me your FPL drafts and it's time to rate them in today's video. It's safe to say there are some brilliant teams here and also a couple of suspect teams that we do need to sort out. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like and of course, smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. And enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, I have to say a massive thank you to everybody that did send through their teams. Of course, I had quite a few sent through that I wasn't able to add all in this video, but it's a good excuse to make sure you are subscribed to the channel because I'll be doing plenty of rating your FPL team draft videos, potentially 2 a week. So as always, make sure you are subscribed. And I need to also caveat this video by saying that, of course, we don't really want to be building the exact same team. If I review these teams and I tell you to build the exact same team as me, there's no fun in the game at all. So when I'm reviewing these teams, I want to take into account your personal preference of the players that you have selected. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to buy the exact same players as my team. So I'm really looking forward to going through these. And first up, we have got a team sent through from FPL Bateman. Thank you so much, mate. And you can see the team on your screen here. And it's worth noting, all of the teams in their own rights are very, very good that I'm going to be reviewing today. And I've put up a bit of a pros, a cons, and a few improvements that I personally would make to the team. So first up, the pros of this team. We've got Salah and Haaland in. I said this from the start. Haaland's price at 50 million is very, very expensive, but does that make him a bad FP option? No. And if we could have Salah and Haaland in our teams, we definitely would do so because there isn't a better forward in the game, and I'd argue there isn't a better midfielder in the game. It's just whether you can justify paying a quarter of your budget towards 2 players, but clearly FPL Bateman could do so with his squad, so that is a massive bonus if you could build a team with both Salah and Haaland in. And also, you can see here that the midfield is invested at different price points, which I always think is really, really important. For example, we got Salah coming in at 12.5 million, the most expensive player. So if you need to downgrade, you can go to any other player in the game, like a Cole Palmer at 10.5. We got Bruno Fernandes at 8.5 million, which gives you the opportunity to float around that price bracket. Gordon at 7.5, again, loads of options around that price, which we can dot in and out of if you want to. And then we have the 6.5 million option in Gibbs White. So again, plenty of 6.5 million options in the game. And then we got obviously the budget option in Minter, who I do think is a brilliant differential. Now, in terms of the problems with this team, the one thing I would say is we got no defender over 4.5 million. If we're going to invest a quarter of our budget in Haaland and Salah, there have to be sacrifices. And unfortunately with this team, it has been in the defensive areas. But if you were to make a downgrade, I think in the defense is where you need to do it. Now, I am a little bit concerned because I think these teams do rotate well. I've checked them out and they do have good fixtures based on which direction you want to go. But I don't love the idea of you not having a 5 million or even a 6 million defender in your ranks. I would argue Minter could be a rotation risk, and looking at your overall 11, I think the 11 is strong, the squad is weak. And if you're going to have someone like a rotation risk like Minter in, I need to look at this bench and say to myself, yes, you have got the strength and depth to justify a pick like Minter, because this guy could come onto the scene and go crazy. But at the time of recording, I do think there is a little bit of hesitancy about whether he is going to be locked in 90 minutes every single week for Brighton, and that could be my concern. So what improvements would I make with this team? Well, again, it is your own team, so I can't be sitting here saying you have to build this particular 11, but I would focus on trying to improve the squad depth. I know it's difficult having Salah and Haaland in your teams, but I look at that bench and say to myself, that is one injury away from being in big, big trouble. And of course, with the 5 free transfers this season, if you can keep rolling your transfer, it's only beneficial. But this team feels like you are clinging on to that starting 11 with Mykolenko as your first backup. And I think you could come into some problems later down in the opening weeks. And also I would say to you is Bruno worth the investment? The only reason I'm saying that is because 8.5 million, I want to be investing that in a player that I know is absolutely justifiable of the price point. So, for example, right now, could maybe Nkunku be better value at 6.5 for you to free up the funds elsewhere in your squad? Something to consider, because I think Bruno is the major question mark where is he truly worth the 8.5 million with the uncertainty of Man United right now? If you think so, then the rest of the team I don't think is that bad. So again, guys, if you're watching this, you have some recommendations, please do put them in the comment section. Tag the manager at FPL Bateman with your recommendations. Overall, think it's a solid team. I think it's a 7, 7.5, but I am really concerned about the strength and depth of your squad if you're going to try to roll your transfers each and every week. Next up, we've got a team sent over from @JakeGeno. Thank you very much, my friends. So straight out of the bat, we can see here, one of the pros of this team is we've got a power midfield. There is no Erling Haaland in this front line, meaning that we've got 6 million automatically to spend in this team. The reason why it's 6 million is because the next most expensive player is going to be Ollie Watkins. So if you don't have Haaland, you are basically freeing up 6 million in your team. So it really is a powerful move if you do choose to go without him. So straight away, I can see this is a very, very powerful midfield. We have got Son coming in at 10 million. We got Gordon at 7.5, Salah at 12.5, Saka at 10, and then we've got the budget enabler of Rodgers at 5 million, who could prove to be one of the best value players in the game. What I also do like with this team is that you do have, as opposed to the first team, some decent premium defenders. Vardial coming in at 6 million and Munoz coming in at 5 million. But I like these two because they're not just traditional centre-backs. These offer attacking potential. Now, I think Munoz, regardless, is going to be a really, really offensive player based on what we saw last season. The question mark I do have right now about Vardial is, does Pep keep the same system? We see him change his teams every single year. He comes out with a different tactic. If Gvardiol remains as a progressive fullback, getting into the final third, then I absolutely love him as a pick. And I'm not sitting here saying he wouldn't, but I just want to make sure I see it happen in pre-season before investing in Gvardiol, because if he does just play as a traditional centre-back, then I would argue maybe going for a Saliba or a Gabriel is going to be better. But right now, I think Gvardiol is an amazing option. So I love the team. I love the powerful midfield, but of course, there are always going to be some problems with any team. The first thing I would say is, similar to the first team, it is quite a weak bench. We got Konsa coming in who could rotate with Ben Mee, but realistically, if you're spending 6 million on Gvardiol and you're spending 5 million on Munoz, they are probably going to play every single week. So you're going to rotate Ben Mee with Konsa. After that, you're relying on Barco to be a starter for Brighton, where there are no guarantees right now. And then you've got Fraser as your forward, who isn't going to get any minutes for Wolves. So straight away, I'm a little bit concerned about the strength and depth of your team. And the other thing, you are going really, really big in the midfield, which I'm not against at all. But is Saka actually going to be available for game week 1? This is a question we can't really answer right now because, of course, we are still a little bit away from game week 1. But as at the time of recording, he's had a very busy Euros, hasn't appeared for pre-season yet because he's on his holidays. 10 million for a player like that is very, very expensive. I would argue maybe try to get him up to 10.5 and get a Cole Palmer who had a very, very reduced minutes in the Euros, who I would expect to play. Or, as I mentioned in the improvements, downgrading Saka maybe to someone like an Nkunku at 6.5 million, which then will give you the funds to improve that third forward in your team. You could just go up to 5.5 if you wanted to of João Pedro, or get yourself to a 6 million like a Chris Wood, just to improve the balance of this team. The other thing I would argue is, if you had to, you could then potentially look to downgrade Pickford to a 4.5 million option. That would allow you to upgrade Saka to Cole Palmer. I do like Son. I think he could be brilliant value, but the only thing I would say is this. The opening 2 fixtures of Spurs are great, but after that, they are a little bit tricky. So be cautious of Son. I think that could be an early transfer out of your team, and that is something that I'm not massively for. But otherwise, I like the team. The midfield looks really, really tasty. I'm going to rate it very similar to the first team. 7, 7.5. I'm a little bit concerned about the depth of your team, because if Barco and Fraser don't play for their respective teams, you are reliant on Konsa being your only player to come into your side if we see rotation with Rodgers or we see injuries. So please do take that in mind, but a solid team nonetheless. Next up, we've got a team set through from Aaron Mather. Again, thank you very much, my friends. So very different team here, which I'm really excited to go in, because there are a couple of differentials, a couple of different ways that they have structured the team. This is the beauty of this season, is because of the price points that FPL headquarters have put players, we can go in different directions. We are not really seeing a template team, which is always a great thing to see. So first up, some of the pros of this team. Premium defenders. I wouldn't say it's necessarily an absolute pro this season, because I don't think defenders are going to be the best investment with the bonus point system basically hindering players for conceding goals, it isn't a great improvement from the game. But you have gone for Saliba at 6 million, Vardy at 6 million, and Cucurella at 5 million. So we got a lot of money invested, and then two 4.5 million options in Konsa and Leif Davis. So I do think it is a pro having premium defenders, but of course it's at what expense for the rest of the team. And you can see here there is no Erling Haaland once again in this team. A bit of a trend going on here, but I don't mind the investment in the defenders, and we will come on to some improvements in a minute. The other thing I do like is a powerful front three. Richarlison coming in with those great opening 2 games, Watkins followed by Isak, which I do think is a brilliant combination. The one thing I would say is, similar to Son, is Richarlison going to be a transfer waiting to happen in your team if game week 3 comes and you still have him and the fixtures turn for the worse? So be a little bit cautious of Richarlison, but for the opening 2 game weeks, I think he is a brilliant differential. And again, when we look at the midfielders, Neto a differential and Martinelli at 7 million. Now, I have voiced my opinion on Martinelli. I personally think he is underpriced and also a brilliant differential. But off the back of last season, I'm going to put him in the same bracket as Rashford. We know there's a player there, and we know that at 7 million, both of them are underpriced. But until we actually see the return of that form, I don't think we can confidently put ourselves in a position where we invest in that player. So I would be cautious about Martinelli, but if he does have a positive pre-season, then I'm all aboard the Martinelli train. So what are some of the issues with that team, apart from what I mentioned about Martinelli? I think you spent too much on the goalkeepers. If you're going to spend 5 million on a goalkeeper, that has to be a goalkeeper week in, week out. I don't think you can have a 5 million pick in Pickford and a 4.5 million in Sanchez. So understand who is going to be your number one and then downgrade the other one to a 4 million goalkeeper. Other thing I would say is 6.5 million for Neto. Again, I want to see that improvement right now, that form, that guarantee that he's got no niggling injuries, and the Wolves fixtures aren't amazing. I would argue that at 6.5 we have better options available with more guaranteed game time, like a Gibbs White, for example. But if, again, we see an improvement from him in pre-season, then Neto is a good option. But game week 1 is not ideal at all. And then I'm going to say this. I think you spent too much in each position. Look at your bench right now. You got Leif Davis, Martinelli, and Alexander Isak. And your starting 11 also looks really strong. So I think you're going to have a headache each and every game week. Whereas the first 2 teams basically had a weak bench, your bench is too strong. You're not committing towards a certain formation. Now, I like being flexible, but for me, I think you have got too much in the midfield and the front line. I, for one, would rather see you either invest in a powerful front 3 and then downgrade your 5th midfielder to a cheap enabler, or go for a powerful front 5 and downgrade one of your third forwards to a 6 million, like a Chris Wood, for example. I think you're going to have a headache each and every game week with this team. The other thing is, I don't think Cucurella is worth it. He's had a very busy Euros. I don't know if he's guaranteed to start for Chelsea, and I don't think it is worth the investment. I'd rather that come down to a 4 million to free up some funds, or another 4.5 million pick. Or if you want to keep it at 5 million, go to someone like a Munoz maybe at Crystal Palace who offers attacking potential. And as I've spoken about, downgrade one of your goalkeepers. But this team, I think, is better than the first few. I'm going to put it about 8. But the problem with this one is you're too much invested in each and every position. Commit to a certain star, whether it's going to be a powerful midfield or a powerful front 3, and the overall team will improve. Next up, we have a team sent through from Hazi AFC. Once again, thank you so much for sending your team through. So in terms of this team here, whereas the one we've just reviewed had too much squad depth, there was too much money invested in each position, this team here has a good starting 11, but the bench is good squad depth, but not spending too much money. So we've got Anderson at 4.5, Leif Davis at 4.5, and Muniz as a cheaper forward. But again, we're not going too heavy in terms of the bench. And I think this is a better example of having good squad depth in your side. The other thing that I do like about this team is that you have a double premium midfield. Now, this team, of course, is going to have no Haaland and no Mo Salah, which we will come on to in a minute. But of course, one benefit of doing that is that you can have 2 premium midfielders in the shape of Cole Palmer and Bukayo Saka, which I'm not against at all. And I think it is a nice little variation to have going into this this game week 1 team. But of course, there are going to be problems. if you go without Haaland and Mo Salah, first and foremost, you haven't got the two most expensive players in their respective positions. So if you want to upgrade to Mo Salah, it's a little bit easier because you have Cole Palmer. But of course, if you want to upgrade to Erling Haaland at any point, then you have a serious price gap between Alexander Isak and Erling Haaland. You haven't even got Watkins in your side where he is the closest thing to Haaland. I'm not sitting here and saying that Watkins is an absolute essential pick, but if you're going to go without Salah and Haaland, I do think you need the next most expensive players in each position just to justify why you haven't got them in case you need to jump the price gap. The other thing that I will say is, of course, not having Salah or Haaland in your team, you're going to have a captaincy headache each and every game week. Now, you might be sat there thinking to yourself, Palmer, Saka, Isak, these are the players that I back. And I do agree, but also Salah and Haaland are just players that offer guaranteed game time alongside consistent returns. And those are the two players as well that I think have the highest potential for double-digit returns. If you have neither of them, I do think you are going to be in a bit of a problem from a captaincy perspective in certain game weeks. The other thing, too much invested in the goalkeeper department. Pope at 5 million, Pickford at 5 million. Pick one to be a goalkeeper and have the other one as a 4 million goalkeeper, because I think this is too much to be spent in your teams, even though you have gone without Salah and Haaland in your side. So what are some of the improvements outside of what I've mentioned? Well, as I stated, I think you need to downgrade one of the goalkeepers because I think it's not worth it. And what you can then do with that 1 million is invest it elsewhere in your team. You could, for example, upgrade Branthwaite because I don't think he is worth it at 5 million, maybe to a 6 million option like Gvardiol. Get yourself a better defender in a better team with attacking potential. Also, as I said, I personally would prefer to have one of Salah or Erling Haaland, and Salah is a lot easier to bring into your team. So with that downgrade and the goalkeeper downgrade, you could maybe look to improve someone like a Saka to a Mo Salah. The other thing I would say is, I don't think Leif Davis is really worth it in the opening game weeks at 4.5. I'd rather that come down to a 4 million fifth defender for now, and we assess how Ipswich are defensively and, of course, Leif Davis in this team. But all in all, I like the team. It's different. I think it's a nice team to have, but I would be a little bit concerned about captaincy without Salah and Haaland. So I'm probably going to put this about 7. A little bit concerned about the captaincy, but I do like the alternating premium midfielders, and Havertz is a bit of a differential in this team. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments, but I'm going to put this about 7 out of 10. And finally, we have got a team sent through from WBA Bloke. Thank you again for sending through your team. And I'm probably going to say this is my favourite team of the lot, and I will come on to reasons why in a minute. But looking at the pros of this team, first and foremost, you have a really strong attacking 8. We've got Salah, Foden, Palmer, Kudus, who I think is a real great differential. And then we've got Rodgers at 5 million, who I think is brilliant. Then we've got a front 3 of Isak, João Pedro, and Watkins. So no Erling Haaland in this team, but of course it does free up the funds to have those powerful midfielders, which you do have in Salah, Foden, and Cole Palmer. The thing that I really like about this team as well is that it has a rotating 5th midfielder with 3rd forward. So what I mean by that is, in this team you can see on your screens, we've got a 3-4-3 formation, but at any given week, this could then change to a 3-5-2, and we could have João Pedro come out of the team and Rodgers come in. And we could also see even a 4-4-2 if we want to see Gvardiol come in at any point. And I would argue, based on the starting 11, if you're going to pay 6 million for Gvardiol, you start him in any fixture regarding of the competition that he has. So Gvardiol needs to come into this team at the expense of Konsa first and foremost. But I think this team is really, really well balanced. Now, of course, there are a few problems. I think we need to monitor Luke Shaw. He had his fitness concerns during the Euros. Is he even going to be available for Man United? And with Man United being one of the worst defences last season, I would really need to see a strong pre-season from them to even justify having a Man United defender going into game week 1. The other thing that I need to say is, of course, Phil Foden. Is he actually going to be available for game week 1? If he is, brilliant. I think he's the next best Man City attacker outside of Erling Haaland, but we need to make sure that he is going to be available because 9.5 million is a lot of budget to invest in him. But I think the team is really well balanced, and I really like the inclusion of Kudus at 6.5 and Barco as a 4 million defender who can just sit on your bench week in, week out, and hopefully he gets his opportunity in that team. But what are the improvements? Well, I don't really think there are tons. Again, I'm not sitting here saying you have to build a certain team, but if you need to free up funds, maybe Cole Palmer down to Nkunku if we see Nkunku shining this preseason, and maybe Cole Palmer comes back late. That could be a route to opening up this team for different directions. But all in all, I think this is really well balanced. I think it's a good example of how you can have cheap enablers like Rodgers, like João Pedro, and rotate them in and out of your team. So I'm actually going to give this an 8.5. I think this is really solid. I think it has a good basis. But of course, we need to monitor certain situations because I think Burn, for example, could be a Livramento if he emerges as an option if Trippier goes. We also need to see if Kudos is actually going to replicate what we saw last year. But all in all, really, really solid team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's and the first FPL ratings of your drafts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, for those that did send through their teams, as I said, this is going to be a regular series, potentially 2 a week. So make sure if you're not already, you are subscribed to the channel to keep up to date with how you can send your teams to me to get rated. As always, have an amazing day, guys. Take care, and I'll see you really soon. Cheers.